Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear students, I'm sure you are updated with all the worksheets of the chapters that have been completed and up to reproduction. So please submit it. Submit all your worksheets for correction and to mail me, message me, or meet me to know if you have got any problems where we are not understanding. So hope the concepts are very clear to you all, and you'll be able to do very well in your exams. These are very interesting life lessons which we are learning through biology, which is going to help you either you make your career in science or not. These are some essential facts you should be knowing for your future life. So we have completed with the reproduction. Now let us see what do you mean by hereditary and progeny, your next chapter. So let me share the screen and we'll go to understand this chapter with us. Okay. So we are going to discuss about what is hereditary. So if you observe, what we observe is in our world, you just see a family tree where we see that there are different observations, the fantastic variety of life, the similarities between them we see, and we need to understand these two characteristics of life in order to understand the life, how it evolves. Okay, we see lot of, and when that something evolves, mean not only that it changes, but that there is some component of the directions in that change. I keep here again, I wanted to tell you why there is a need whenever you're studying anything, always make up your mind to go in a scientific methodology, follow a scientific methodology. For example, I told you, okay, whenever you wanted to solve a problem, you wanted to get some solution. So how are you going to get that solution, right? One second, how is it changed? Uh, one sec, let me change my name. It's my daughter's name that's been showing here. So what are we doing here is, um, I told you you have to go with some systematic analysis, right? You have a problem, you think of it, and then what do? Like there are various steps in your science fair, you have so many questions about, you see some problem around. Like for example, you see your friend. Now, after this hereditary progeny, I'm sure you'll start observing human beings very carefully to see what are the similarities and differences, and what are the varieties, and what are the fantastic or the good characteristics that has been carried from one place to another. Right. So what are we doing is, once you observe something, there are so many questions that involuntarily start coming to your mind. Out of this question, you make your hypothesis. Okay, and then to prove your hypothesis, you have to plan an experimentation. All right, and then if you plan an experimentation, then you just test it, collect data, and then you will come to know whether your hypothesis has been accepted or it got rejected. Now, when it comes to the hereditary and progeny, I would just say, like, for example, you take an example, like my parents, I'm a second daughter of my parents. Before I was born, maybe there were so many questions and they might have talked about so many things, discussed and thought of going for a child. And then they must have done some experiment, or they have done something to get a concrete me right in front of you. So that has to be when you're planning something, how are you planning and how are you going to achieve the end results, is what we are going to discuss and see in this project. Okay, I mean in this hereditary, to from parents to progeny. How are these characteristics being carried? Like DNA, we all the time we talk about, you look into forensic medicines, you have learned about so many detective stories where, you know, if there is some crime has happened, how was that criminal is caught because of his DNA. And the DNA is found either in the fingerprints, from the hair, from any part of the body. So what exactly is the DNA, and how is it responsible to carry this from parents to progeny or children? So let's see how this is all is happening. What is hereditary? You know, it's a process of acquiring characteristic traits from the parents. The hereditary is, you say that this is my, nowadays, you know, when you go to a hospital, the doctors would ask you what are the hereditary diseases, like what are the diseases your parents were suffering, so that they can help you. And a pregnant woman can, even the science has become so advanced that when the baby is in the fetus, at that time only, if there are some hereditary diseases, that can be rectified to have a healthy you know, generations, healthy progeny or the next generations. And this all has come into existence after, it's not so easy to do what science is doing now. So from so many centuries, maybe from 16th century onwards, the people are trying it out. Now in your science fairs also, you don't directly try it on the human beings or the animals. If you have an hypothesis, you start experimenting it on the plants. So similarly, Mendel has also done it on a pea plant. So you can see what are the results and how did he prove his theory of hereditary and its characteristics that's been transferred to its progeny. So new characteristics and variations, you find some variations. Like for example, you can make chart like this and start observing it in your home, in your neighbors, your family, your friends. So what can you do is, you know, you make a chart which makes you in which, you know, you are writing us characteristics. What are the characteristics in me? What are the characteristics in my mother or father? Or what are the characteristics in my grandma and grandpa? Okay, so what are we now doing here is, what characters, for example, you wanted to check those characters that are there in you. What is the color of your eye? You want to see your eye color is black, and then you find out your father and mother should also be black, and your grandparents, so whoever is having black eye, that means their parents and the grandparents, they all will be having, definitely be having black eyes. And type of nose, it has to be, if your nose is long and your parents nose is also long, but it may not be for, you know, the previous generations. Maybe your grandmother or grandfather were not having that nose which your father, and you have inherited it from the father. So we'll talk about what is dominant and recessive genes once we go ahead. It's very interesting. Now, and color of hair also, generally black hair everybody should have, all the generations will have black hair. It is carried from their grandparents. Now, type of hair, it could be curly hairs or straight hairs. So supposing if your parents were having curly hairs and you are also having curly hairs, but it's not necessary that your grandparents also should have. They may have straight hair, okay? So this is how it's few of the things that you carry that are from your grandparents to you. Now, if you just see, oh, what happened here? 1 second. Let's do this. We don't want this one. We have to share. Not this. So let's see what exactly that got disturbed. So let me check it out with this again. So what were we checking it here? Checking out here was, we did an activity where we wanted to see. Now, similarly, you have to check this. So these characteristics you have seen. Now you make a chart, okay, and check it about your friend. You have done it for yourself, and then you can check this to your friends also. Write down the names, take at least 4 friends and check all these characteristics. What are you going to check is, one, color of the skin, and earlobes. You know, certain times you must have seen that the earlobes are attached. Some of them are hanging and some of them are got attached like this. So just check out whether they have an attached earlobes or the free earlobes. And then making on inner side of the thumb. Okay, how is their inner side of the thumb, length of their forehead, color of their eyes, cornea's color, and any other features like whether they have the straight hair, long nose, face, etc. So anything you can pick it up. Like for example, here he has given some samples, but I don't want you to just copy these samples. You have to just see that this is how you have to make a list of it, and tell us what did you find, how did you find, you know. Like here he's saying Ganesh's skin color is fair and his earlobes are free. His inner thumb is conical, inner side of the thumb is conical. He has got a broad forehead, black colored eyes, curly hair, short nose, whether he has got a curly hair, short nose, round face, etc. So similarly, you have to collect the data of your friends in this fashion. And then you just see what all are the characteristics you are going to observe, and then can you just compare those characteristics there that has been carried from their parents or grandparents, how is it that it is being carried to them. So what happened, you know, uh, when these things, George Mendel in 1857, in 18th century 57, Gregor John Mendel, he worked on the problem of how the variations are passed from one generation to another. So to this, you know, the advantages, because it's not so easy to check so many, you know, it requires a lot of patience, observation, and a person has to be into it. And this person was lucky enough to get an environment where he could test his hypothesis on what all his hypothesis was and to prove it. So what did Mendel do was that because he wanted to see the variations, he was saying that you just, when you check that you are not just similar to your parents, there is, because your mother and father both mixed character and you have come out with some different variations. So how is this variations happening? So what he did, and can we have the desired variations? Like for example, you know, everybody like fair color, blue eyes, brown hair, blunt hair, or you know, if you want to, and a long nose. Do you want to have the characteristics? Is it possible? Now science is able to do it today because Mendel has shown them the way using a pea plant. So let us see what has he done. As you know, Mendel, as I told you, the advantages Mendel was having was he was a monk. Monk are the people who do not marry. There were nobody for him to disturb, no responsibilities, no family. So he had an ample time to do this beautiful, great work. But there are so many people who have such advantages, but everybody doesn't do that. So a big round of applause to Mendel for this wonderful experiment and showing us how the variations happens. So what he did is he was interested in the garden of monastery. These monks live in a place called monastery, and he was having a big garden over there. So what he did is he worked for over 7 years, after which after 7 years of hard work and observation, he could present his conclusions. And from his conclusions, what were his conclusions? What he did is he made a very interesting, you know, experiments on a pea plant to see that how this, you know, he took various different shapes. Like for example, right now you see the mutter in the pea, you know, the mutter we get, it is round and smooth. But there were the, mutter which was wrinkled also earlier. But because the demand was more and everybody wanted round and smooth, not the wrinkled one, they wanted round and green. Otherwise, wrinkled, yellow, green and round, there were different shapes and colors of the peas that were available earlier. But based upon the demands and more supply, or there could be many natural calamities also that can happen, and that stops the growth of one type of, what do you call, one type of a plant or a fruit or a vegetable, or so that can be even, the experiments have been done on the small insect beetle nuts also, the beetle nuts which are found on the beetle leaf. On that also we have made a desired color, change the desired color in order to protect their generations. So similarly, what he did is, what was his interesting experiment, how Mendel has done it, you can see that his experimental data is in a form of a detailed research paper, and Mendel made many careful, very careful. That's what I'm telling you, whenever you are doing a project and if you want to proof your project, you have to, because there's so many people, it is not, you the ones who are just are the students who are reading. If the scientists are reading in a second, they will be able to make out key whether you have done it in your real sense or just copied from somewhere. If you are doing a research, complete research with the and collect experimental data. So what Mendel did, Mendel made very careful observation. And he observed that the planned and designed experiment to find the answers. He had worked on nearly 10,000 pea plants of 34 different varieties. If you want to prove your hypothesis, more and more data. He has to just imagine, he has experimented it on the 10,000 pea plants, and these 10,000 pea plants were having 34 different varieties on which he has done his experiment. That is the reason now, he has become world famous and his experiments. And what he did, he has chosen 7 distinguishing form of characters, and his experimental outcomes give the idea how the variations were passed from one generation to another. For example, he has taken F1, first generation purple colored flower, and then in the F2 generation, he has seen the variations after the self-pollination. He was an exemplary person for his observations, planning, patience, and experimental skills. So what has he done? The result of the Mendel F1 crosses for 7 characteristics in the pea plants. So what all of the characteristics he has chosen, and then he called it a dominant triad and a recessive triad. Dominant and recessive, for example, I have shown you earlier that your grandfather was having a short nose, but whereas your father has got a long nose, you have got a long nose. That means your grandfather was having a recessive long nose and a dominant short nose. What is dominant is seen. If my nose is short, it is dominant, but maybe in my recessive triad, I may be having a long nose, and that could be carried into my next generation. I don't know whether my daughters or my granddaughters may have a long nose, which is recessive in me, and it may become dominant in the next generations. So this is what he was trying to explain us. What are the dominant trend, recessive trend, F2 generation, dominant, recessive, and what are the ratios? What are the probabilities? He has even shown us the probabilities. For example, if I have got a short, your mother is having a short nose, your father has got a long nose, then, when they crossbreed, what are the chances of the next generation having a long nose or a short nose? So that probability also Mendel has mentioned in F2 generation, and he has clearly given the ratio. It is a 3:1 ratio in which it was found. Like, he has taken a purple. What he did is he took a purple and white. Purple color was dominant and white color was recessive. So what he did in F2 generation, dominant and recessive, he has found that 705 flowers were having dominant triad. Dominant triad was purple, and then recessive were white. So 224, he got white triads in the next generation, and 705 as a purple one. So his ratio was 3:1. So 3 times purple color was more when compared to white flower, when he has taken the color of a flower. And then position of the flower he took, it was axial and terminal. Then what he would do is axial was dominant over terminal position of a flower. So you can see that axial flowers are like this, and terminal are, they bend a little. So he took this triad again, axial and terminal, and then he found that 651 were dominant axial flowers in the next F2 generation, and 207 were terminal. So it was again in the ratio of 3:1. And then he took a seed color of the pea plant. The seed was yellow and green. And what he found was, yellow was dominant and green was recessive. Then he found that 6,022 yellow seeds and 2,001 green seeds. So these all are the different, and look at the pot shape, was inflated, constricted, and what are the generations. So here he got his, again, you can say 2.93:1 ratio. And then green and yellow also in the same 2:3:1 ratio he got. I mean, with a slight variation. Then stem length he has selected as tall and dwarf, and tall was dominant and dwarf was recessive. So everywhere near about his data which he has collected were in the ratio of 3:1. So regarding this experiment with pea plants, Mendel hypothesized. What was his hypothesis for this is, the characters were carried as a trials, and an organism always carried a pair of factors for a character. So it has a pair. Whenever, when you see a person tall, that means he is having a short recessive characteristics. So they are, the opposites are always paired. That is what was his hypothesis, and he was trying to prove it. So what did Mendel do? What experimentation has he done? He has done on 10,000 pea plants. So what he did is, the distinguished trials of the same characters were present in the population of an organism. The trials shown by a pea plant must be in the seeds that produce them. So he said that where is this pea plant is originally coming from where? It was from the pea plant. So what he has to do is, he has to take a seed of a pea plant seeds, and then he has to work from the seeds to see the variations. So seeds are the main uh, uh, experimental material which he was using. So what he did is, first 60 fertilizations on 15 plants. He worked on fertilizing 15 plants, and in second experimentation, 58 fertilizations he did on 10 plants. And in third experimentation, he did 35 fertilizations on 10 plants. Okay, and fourth experiment, 40 fertilizations on 5 plants. So and fifth, again 23 fertilization on 5 plants. You can see the various different characteristics he was taking and experimenting. And in the sixth experiment, he did 34 fertilization on 10 plants. And what we do is, we become so tired after one experiment, we want to jump to the conclusion and give our results. That's where we fail. Anything, if you want to become a successful scientist, or if you want to prove your hypothesis, you have to consistently work over it. Then only it is possible. So one second. So what he did is, in his sixth experiment, he took 34 fertilization on 10 plants. Okay, he used 37 fertilizations and used 10 plants. And then Mendel selected such kinds of plants that express a selected character over several generations. From, his selection was the important is to know his selection. And he used a pure breed. What did he do is, he used 2 pure breed of peas of seed color. He took first the color, which is contrasting. He took yellow and green color, and they are representing yellow was represented by capital Y and green was represented by small y. So he started cross fertilizing. So he used cross pollination, cross fertilization took place, and he used this pure breeds, a piece of different properties. Here he took as an example, and the characteristic colors of the pea seeds were yellow and green. And then what he did, he cross-pollinated this pure breed and then yellow and green and gave rise to this. So what did he found in his first F1 generation? So in F1 generation, what Mendel has observed is the first, when he has used yellow and green bead, he got yellow. F1 generation was yellow. That means F1 is having a dominant yellow color and recessive green color. That means in F2 generation, we can expect even green colored peas. Okay. In his first file of progeny of first generation parents, filial means progeny. Filial, we are talking about either I say progeny, generation, children, or babies, or baby plants, or filial. That means it is the next generation. So all pea seeds of this generation were yellow. These pea plants are on self-pollination gave rise to this yellow color. Okay. Now they were self-pollinated. Now we are not, earlier we did a cross-pollination, but after self-pollination of this yellow seed plant, we found that three seeds were yellow and one was green. That is again in the ratio of 3:1. So now, though we have used only yellow color, but we got a F2 generation progeny as, you know, so though it's very interesting, but I just don't want you to, I want you to thoroughly understand this concept. So let us stop here and then we'll go for further particular properties and the traits without confusing much. So we have just discussed only about one characteristic, the color of the pea plant. So let us go for further aspects later. So till then, go through this video and come back to me for the further. Once you all give me a thumbs up in the group and say that you're ready for the next video, I'm going to post you and you have understood this basic concepts thoroughly well. So till then, take care, stay safe, follow our precautionary rules, because again, we are hearing about so many spikes in the rise in the COVID cases. So work on building your immunity and don't forget performing your salah, which is very important to maintain your hygiene as well as your immunity. And see you all in the next class. Till then, take care. Allah Hafiz.